All right, so the Baltimore Ravens really splurged over the weekend and signed Odell Beckham Jr. to an absurd contract. But what other former Giants receiver is now being linked to the Birds? And with over half of the Eagles' top 30 visits accounted for, we're beginning to get a picture of what Howie Roseman will do. Will that include Bijan Robinson? But first, let's run it. Hey everybody, happy Monday. I hope you had a wonderful weekend, an incredible Easter celebrating with friends and family. If you don't know, I'm Josh Davis and I cover the Birds. So do me a favor, please go ahead and hit that like button. And also, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, turn the notifications on so you're caught up to date on all the latest Eagles news. Bleeding Green Nation posted the mock draft, the community mock draft of who the Eagles take at 10. It's a really cool, fascinating prospect. Bleeding Green Nation goes through and it's kind of a first come, first serve, but you can pick whoever you want to be or whoever you want to pick for that team. And Brandon Lee Gouton will go ahead and kind of allot you to specific teams and you make those picks. And then you just kind of slowly see the draft unfold. Now, you can't do any trades, so just forget about that as you start to see how this unfolds. But they've started making picks and the Eagles, as you see, made their selection at number 10. It says 2023 NFL mock draft, Philadelphia Eagles pick a cornerback at number 10. The cornerback there was Devin Witherspoon. There's lots of arguments you could make of, what was the reason for taking Devin Witherspoon, who was available, what were the other options perhaps, and you see right there's the selections. You had number 1, Bryce Young went off the board. Number 2, CJ Stroud. Number 3, Will Anderson. Number 4, the Colts, kind of interesting there, went in for an Anthony Richardson. Number 5, Jalen Carter. That's not surprising that he's being taken off the board, and reports are that he's going to meet with the Seahawks pretty soon. Tyree Wilson at number 6, Paris Johnson with the Raiders at number 7. You've also got Christian Gonzalez going to the Falcons at 8, and then the Bears taking Peter Skoronski at 9. So it leaves you with the Eagles on the clock. Who do they select? And according to the community mock draft, the Philadelphia Eagles take Devin Witherspoon. Now, I don't think that's a terrible pick, and you could argue that Devin Witherspoon is the top cornerback in the class. You also could say Christian Gonzalez, but I think you could go either or and be in a great position. But I don't know if that's realistic for Howie Roseman to go ahead and select a cornerback at number 10. In fact, Peter King also agrees with me. If you didn't catch it, he actually commented on his article what he thinks the Eagles should do or might do. I think if I were Howie Roseman, I'd draft Bijan Robinson 10th overall, break the Eagles' mold of always fortifying the two lines, and say to the world, okay, you all try to stop Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and B.J. Robinson. I know you can't. Yeah, okay, I'll say it again. You won't be able to stop it. And if you followed closely, I'm all about Bijan Robinson. I do think 10 is probably a little bit high, but in this scenario, if you're telling me I can't trade back, then Bijan Robinson really makes a lot of sense. I don't know if there's other names there that I say, yeah, let's go ahead and grab one of those and then possibly trade up later. That's the only other scenario that you could possibly argue for. But I think out of the options that were available in the draft, and again, you see the names that were already selected, there's not really anyone else. So in my mind, you go ahead, you grab Bijan Robinson and you say to the whole world, try and stop us. Now, for the arguments of people saying Bijan Robinson is not Saquon Barkley, he's unlike these other types of guys, he's maybe a Christian McCaffrey, he's not a Derrick Henry, but I think the one thing that we're forgetting is lots of other scouts are also saying that Bijan Robinson is as good, if not slightly better than Saquon Barkley. Who knows what we'll see, and if that ends up being the case, but I think Saquon Barkley could have and would have had a better career had he been behind one of the best offensive lines in football. So you put him behind the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, I'm not going to go down this road crazy because you've heard it from me time and time again, but I think at this pick, Bijan Robinson would have been the best selection. And it looks like most of you agreed with me. I put out a poll on the channel here, and you see the results. 65% of you said Bijan Robinson. If that was your selection there, you would have taken Bijan Robinson. Now, there's 13%, obviously, that agree with the pick, 15% with a Nolan Smith, and then a 6% went with Van Ness or other. Now, there were lots of other comments of a bunch of other names that we could have mentioned. I think it's telling there. Bijan Robinson is obviously the majority's favorite pick. Now let's get into why I don't think Devin Witherspoon is a realistic pick here, a realistic choice. So there was an article by SI.com, and John McMullen really brought up the point here of we've gotten into the Eagles' top 30 visits. There's 16 now that have taken place at the time of this recording, so we're over halfway through, but if you read between the lines, Howie Roseman is starting to give you a great picture of what he's hoping to accomplish. You may ask yourself, what do I mean by that? Take a look at who the top 16 or the first 16 of the top 30 visits have been and where this theme seems to suggest. 12 of the 16 visits, 75%, have been on the defensive side where new defensive coordinator Sean Desai has been tasked with producing after the organization lost 5 starters in free agency. Tackle Javon Hargrave, linebacker TJ Edwards, Kazir White, safety CJ Gardner-Johnson, and Marcus Epps. Now you might be asking yourself, wait a minute, didn't you say say Devin Witherspoon is not a realistic pick? Yes, I did. So hold on. Take a look at what he says further. The rest of the visits are 3 offensive linemen, Northwestern's Peter Skoronski and Ohio State bookend tackle duo of Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones. That should be no surprise since Roseman's ethos is to always build on the sides of the football up front first. The lone outlier brought in has been Texas running back Bijan Robinson, a superstar level prospect who doesn't fit the Eagles' well-known valuation model for a top 10 pick. Cursory interest in Robinson could be the attempt to trade down at number 10 and gather more draft capital by luring someone up to take the swing at the Longhorns prospect. His argument here is saying the possibility of the Eagles visiting with Bijan Robinson is to lure teams up to try to select him and get some more draft picks. While I'm not really much in favor of that because I do want Bijan, I think that's realistic that Howie could do that and might do it knowing what he likes to go after. But let me get back to the argument of why Devin Witherspoon is not a great choice or why I don't think it's a realistic option. Look at the visits. Take a look at it again. The potential at number 10. If you take a look at the names that he's brought in, you've got the potential, realistic potential for guys being taken number 10. Jalen Carter has an official visit. Nolan Smith, Peter Skoronski, Joey Porter Jr., Lucas Van Ness, Bijan Robinson, and Paris Johnson. Like John was mentioning there, those are the potential ones at 10. Now, why do we not see a Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez? They haven't met with the Eagles yet. I know you could argue they might be coming in on future visits. You don't really use a top 30 visit unless you're pretty certain. Yes, you could, again, make an outlier case that sometimes guys get drafted that didn't meet with teams. But most of the time, in this day and age, you visit with a player who is realistically going to be available and you select. Especially with that high of draft capital, you're not going to take a flyer on someone that's like, we have some scouting on him, yeah, but we actually never had an official visit, an official interview with him. The fact that you haven't met with Devin Witherspoon or a Christian Gonzalez leads me to believe you're not going to take a corner at 10, not even Joey Porter, because yes, he's there, but I think most of us would agree that's a reach if you take him at 10. Plus, look at this further. So potential for who number 30 is, look at the official visits. You've got Emmanuel Forbes, Mississippi State, BJ Ojulari, LSU, Keely Ringo, Georgia, DeJuan Jones, Ohio State, Brian Breezy, Clemson. Those are potential picks that, yes, I think you could pick at 30 or might be close somewhere around there. You could argue that some of those might not be available, but those are a little bit more realistic. So all of a sudden, you start to get a little bit of a better picture of what Howie Roseman might be doing on draft night, because then really the other visits are day 2 or potentially even day 3 guys where they're looking further on in the draft. John kind of sums it up here and he says, you can kind of see Roseman's thinking. If you get help for the defensive line at number 10, then there should be a host of options at cornerback, and it's easier to take a Cam Jurgens-like redshirt player behind the aging Darius Slay and James Bradbury at number 30 in the early second round. As much as we might not like that, if you're a fan of Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez, I think that's more realistic. Yeah, you take a player who's maybe an early second round, especially if you've traded back now, you've gathered up more picks, you've got other options. So that's what I'm in favor of. Would love to know what you guys think, though. Is this something that you would like to see, or do you think that it's smoke and mirrors and that Howie is actually very interested in Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez? Again, I know there's a lot of time. We could see an official visit get done, but as of right now, there's been no reports that either of those two players have met with the Eagles. So it could be a telling sign. Let's move on. More news was broken by Adam Schefter yesterday, which he does quite a bit, but you probably already saw this at this point. Odell Beckham Jr. is signing with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, that's not incredibly surprising, the fact that he's signing with them, but what is surprising is the contract. So Adam Schefter says here they agreed on a deal worth up to $18 million per source. Now, it's come out that it's $15 million guaranteed with an additional $3 million in potential bonuses, so could get up to $18 million. My first thought on that was, what? $15 million guaranteed? I get that Odell Beckham can be great, and he's shown flashes of it, but the recent injury history has all sorts of question marks and red flags written all over it for me. So I don't know why you do that type of signing, but the Baltimore Ravens felt strongly enough to get him, and I think this is probably telling that you're going to keep Lamar Jackson. Otherwise, why are you spending all this money on a guy for a 1-year deal? Yeah, you could sure try to say, well, what if they get a quarterback in the draft? They need someone to throw to. Maybe, but you're spending a lot of money on a guy that you could either try to draft another receiver or sign a different free agent, but do something a little bit more long-term instead of a 1-year deal. This seems like a team that's trying to win it now, or at least get in position. Probably you're keeping Lamar Jackson at this point. Obviously, there's no other interest that we've heard of from other teams, but it's just crazy for that type of a deal on a wide receiver. But speaking of a former Giants wide receiver, the Eagles are actually linked to another former Giants player. So who is that? You might be asking yourself, well, according to Jimmy Kempski of the Philly Voice, Kenny Golladay. That might be an option for the Eagles to look into at wide receiver in the free agent market. So you take a look at this article here, and Jimmy says, Well, the Eagles have 2 star receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and then there's Quez Watkins, who had a bad 2022 season. Otherwise, they have virtually no depth whatsoever at wide receiver. Sure, I'll give you that. There's not a whole lot of depth, and we know that we need to take someone, but don't we want to look in the draft? Well, Jimmy says, the Eagles are a shot play passing team, and Golladay is a down-the-field receiver. While there is plenty of blame for Golladay for his play in New Jersey, there's also a decent excuse to be made for him that his talents weren't being maximized while playing on one of the worst and most conservative offenses in the NFL. Fair point, he didn't really get a lot of looks or put in the best positions, and if you put him in the Eagles situation, that's a possibility. I could potentially look at it, but Jimmy goes on to write, as far as a potential role, Golladay was thought of as a good blocker in his time in Detroit. If he is willing to take on a Zach Pascal-like role, he could actually be a significant upgrade. Of course, Golladay is a player who has made around $50 million over his career, so he'd probably have to convince the Eagles that he would embrace a dirty work role if he were interested in joining a Super Bowl contender. He would absolutely have to convince us that he's willing to take in that type of role because, quite honestly, I felt like at times he kind of quit or at least seemed very disinterested. Again, it's probably easy to get disinterested in a Giants offense that had a Daniel Jones who was not throwing the ball very effectively, nor to a wide receiver very often. Sure, you get him into an NFC champion with Jalen Hurts with this offense where he's probably going to get some decent looks because defensive backs are going to be keying off of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. There's lots of other options. So maybe if he's wanting to win a championship or make a run at it, if I'm Kenny Golladay, sign me up. Yeah, but the question still comes back to what is the money going to be like? And did Odell Beckham Jr. just screw the market in terms of he just got $15 million guaranteed for 1 year? I don't know if Kenny Golladay is going to be willing to sign up for what I would be willing to pay, or maybe you would be willing to pay, but I'm not totally opposed to a Kenny Golladay. I think he could have a resurgence, and you're not asking him to be wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, or probably even wide receiver 3, because let's be honest, we use Dallas Goedert like a wide receiver 3. So I'm not so much against it. It would, again, just come down to the financial ramifications. But what do you guys think? You like the idea of Golladay? Not so much. Okay, we'll be getting into some more prospects really on the defensive line because I think that's the target for the Eagles at number 10, or at least drafting very early in the first round. So question will be, who should that be? What are the different grades? We'll be taking a look at it in some upcoming videos, as well as are there other options? As much as I hate to say it, if you don't get Bijan Robinson, please make sure to like and subscribe. But I appreciate you guys joining as always. Until next time, I'm Josh Davis, and this has been the Philly Special.